could see all of that worry and all of that aloofness and standoffishness just melt away. And I just felt so welcome. And I felt like I really made an amazing cultural connection there. And also, they probably had never met an American person who spoke Korean so well before, and much less an American person who was not Caucasian, who could even speak any Korean. So for them, it must have just been the first time, as for me, the first time to have had such an experience as well. So it was just a beautiful moment that I'm going to cherish for the rest of my life, really.
It's going to be a really neat behind the scenes.
And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so weird.
Because something always magical happens.
Wait, what? Did you just make that up? Hey, it's Meredith for Real, the Curious Introvert. Listen each week as I talk with someone new. The topics are as ADD as I am, but they'll inspire you to stay curious and grow.
Big thanks to our location sponsor, the UWF Historical Trust.
Hey, Curiositors, it's me, Meredith. If you've been listening to the show for any length of time, you already know I am incredibly enthusiastic about the connectedness of our world, and comparing cultures is so fun for me. Culture tells part of the tale of where we all come from, and for the person willing to listen, it's a treasure chest of insight into the people around us. I love exploring our differences without dividing into sides. And that's why I'm so excited for you to meet this week's guest. You're going to love his stories and his optimism. If you need a little sunshine in your life this week, this episode will bring it to you all the way from Goa, India. Enjoy, my friends. And as always, I want to know who you are and where you're listening from. So send me a message and let me know where you're at. I'm on Instagram and Facebook as Meredith for Real. Okay, Americans, most of us don't have a valid passport. We could attribute that to our on average 12 days of annual paid vacation for sure. But traveling abroad has other barriers as well, language. And for the 25% of Black and Brown Americans, racism and colorism is yet another consideration. Today, my guest is going to share his personal experiences on all of it. His family is from southern India. He grew up in the U.S. and has since been to 78 countries, spending about a month in each place. He's an actor, university lecturer, language trainer, tourism consultant, and smarty pants, because wait for it. He has bachelor degrees, plural, from Temple University in Philadelphia in psychology, visual anthropology, I don't know what that is either, but it sounds fabulous, and cognitive neuroscience, and a master's in applied linguistics from the University of Portsmouth in the UK. Multilingual, multi-talented, the resilient and ridiculously beautiful Sriram Ganesan.
Oh, wow. Geez. I should hire you to do all my PR from now on.
Hey, if it gets me a ticket to India, we can talk.
Yeah.
I was thinking
Definitely.
back of when we met, and I know it was in Nicaragua, but was it did we meet when you busted your knee?
No, it was after that I had busted my knee, but I did kind of bust my knee when I was surfing one day. So that did happen. So we met in Popoyo. So I just arrived there because I wanted to surf. I had been surfing in Morocco earlier in the year, and it was my first time in my life basically getting on a surfboard. And I wanted to try again, and Nicaragua seemed like an amazing opportunity. So I crossed the border over from Costa Rica and we met there.
That's so funny. And then my husband and I crossed the border from Nicaragua into Costa Rica right after we met. So we kind of switched places. Well, we connected and became fast friends. So obviously that connecting piece is something that you're very natural at. And language is a big part of that, because I remember when we went to the restaurant and we were like ordering food and you just started speaking Spanish. And I was like, right on, okay. So what do you feel like you would personally miss out on if you didn't have that language piece of the multicultural connection?
Wow, just the ability to connect and relate on an interpersonal level with people, especially when you travel. And I think that for me, just the ability to communicate in a different language has just changed my travel experiences and taken them to another level. I mean, to be honest, like Spanish, a lot of us in the US, we study Spanish as a second language in school. I was one of them. Personally, I think in the US, we generally start learning second languages far too late. In the game, usually by middle school or something is when most people, at least in my generation, started studying a second language. So I had done that all through middle school and high school. Sorry, I've been living out of the US for a very long time. So I did it through middle school and high school, and then, graduated, and then I completely forgot all my Spanish. And it was when I went down to Mexico one summer, and, when you have to order food and take a bus and live and do things and essentials, you quickly learn again. And what I found is that all of the grammar and stuff was still back there somewhere in the language part of my brain, and then just having to use it every day just gave me the confidence to speak. And then traveling through Latin America, I gained I would hope a respectable level of fluency in Spanish. So I have friends that I only speak in Spanish with and stuff, and it's just been such a gift to be able to understand different ways of thinking and interact with people in their own language, because they can truly express themselves better in their own language. So even if they are trying to speak English for my benefit, there's always something that gets lost in translation. And of course, there is always something that gets lost in translation when I'm speaking Spanish, because I'm not a native speaker, but I can at least understand what they mean, even if I can't verbalize myself in response the same way.
I agree. And I think that from my experience speaking Spanish and learning Spanish, it gives you insight into how a Spanish-speaking person would think. Not just
Absolutely.
grammar, but like their idioms.
Absolutely.
I definitely have a few favorites, or even, here's a good example, like in Spanish, you know how they say, no sirve para nada, like you're good for nothing. In English, we say
Right.
good for nothing. So that kind of is an insight that we reflect ourselves in terms of value. But in Latino culture, it's how hard of a worker are you? What do you bring? Who do you serve? What do you serve? And I love that part of the culture. And so understanding the linguistic piece unlocks an insight into the cultural piece.
And, I think also when you're traveling, you're so often exposed to customer service situations. And one of the things that always captured my heart, especially in Mexico, was how people, when you would dine out in a restaurant and you would leave and say gracias, and they would say para servirle, which I just found so beautiful. Instead of just saying you're welcome, de nada or something, it was just such a beautiful, like, to serve you. I'm happy to serve you, as a way of thanking you for your patronage. I just found it really beautiful. And it just took the whole experience of traveling to another level when you can start to understand their way of thinking.
Gosh, that's so true. Do you have any favorite idioms in Spanish or any other languages that you find other than para servirle or like that are funny?
I mean, I don't know necessarily funny, but how much did you love in Costa Rica how everyone would always say pura vida to everything,
Yeah.
It was like, you'd say gracias for a mojito, and they'd be like pura vida. That would be their response, which is just like pure life. Life is meant to be enjoyed, and it's blissful, and every moment is a gift. And this is what life is about,
Yeah.
And I think we in quote unquote more developed societies, and I really say that in with the bunny ears and the quotation marks, because if we talk about having infrastructure and nonstop electricity as a sign of development, then I think cultures, such as Mexico and Costa Rica, where family and community are so important, if we can't look at that from a different angle to see these cultures as being actually developed in their own way, I think we're actually missing the big picture.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's huge insight. I did love it, how it was you're welcome, it was hello, it was goodbye, it was you after you caught a good wave, it was all that. I love in Mexico as my favorite, they're called modismos, idioms, and my favorite is just in case, which it translates for if the flies, por si las moscas.
Oh, yeah. Oh, really? I thought I never knew.
Yeah, por si las moscas. Take your jacket.
Por si las moscas. Oh, wow. Okay.
So for most Americans who do learn language later in life or never at all, 8 languages, you said, at some level.
Yes. Yeah. I would say very fluent in about four and a half of them, I'd say now. Around 4 or 5 of them I'm very fluent in, and the other 3 I'm conversational and can get by. And that's only because those languages are just from countries where I don't really meet a lot of people who speak those languages anymore. And those were languages I learned when I was living in those countries specifically. So over time, of course, like all things, language ability starts to depreciate a bit if you're not constantly practicing. So, but the thing is, if I go back to one of those countries again, it comes back very quickly as well.
That's good to know. I think a big barrier for people in the States is part of what you just said is having that immediate application of the language. So they just, for them, it's not practical. And then if they don't enjoy it on top of it, if they're not a language nerd, then there's no real incentive for them to learn it. But that being said, these are interesting times. We're in quarantine. We're like, my brain is turning to mush. I am eating excessive amounts of banana bread. What shall I do? I will learn a language. So for that person, what would you suggest as the way to get the most traction the fastest in any new language?
For me, when I started learning some of the more foreign languages to me that weren't necessarily from a culture that I grew up with or were far reaching for me, one of the biggest ways of learning that was beneficial for me was actually something like Rosetta Stone, which was very, very, very integrative. And the whole idea behind Rosetta Stone, I don't work for Rosetta Stone or anything like that. I'm not advertising for them. But for me, it really worked well because they essentially approach language teaching and language learning to the natural way, which is essentially, when we were children and we would look at something and not know the word, our caregiver would say that word for us, and then it would we would make those connections. We never actually learned what the word for paper is through another language, So what Rosetta Stone does is basically it just puts up images on the screen and then just says words. So you're not actually using a dictionary or translating from one language into another. You're actually learning another language as if you learned your first language. Of course, it's not the perfect way to learn a language. There are some, things that can be improved on the Rosetta Stone approach as well. But I do think it's a great way to start building vocabulary and start understanding simple sentences and concepts and stuff without having to use English as the intermediary between the two.
Yeah, so remove the English and just develop a brain of, if you're learning Spanish, develop a Spanish brain, or if you're learning Chinese, a Chinese brain.
Totally. And also incidentally, and I'm just sharing this because I'm really excited about it, I just saw online that Rosetta Stone is offering a lifetime membership.
What?
For like 80% discount right now.
What?
Yeah, it's crazy. They're offering a lifetime membership plus like 2 different apps or something for like $197 for lifetime to access all their languages and everything. I'm totally going to sign up this week. So if there are any listeners out there who love learning languages, like get on that because that's a steal of a deal.
Oh my gosh. I'll make sure to post that this week because this won't air until later. So it won't be going on when it airs, but wow, I'm super intrigued by that.
Super exciting.
Because I would love to learn some more languages.
Yeah. I mean, language is the key. I mean, we live in a global society today, and I think Anglophones, just English speakers in general, we have the gift that people around the world want to learn how to speak English fluently, which is a gift, but then also a curse, because I think in general, it makes us very complacent. And a lot of Anglophones then feel, well, everybody wants to learn English anyway, so why do I really need to make the effort to learn another language? But in this global society that we live in, I feel like it's everyone's duty to make, or at least show their part, that they're part of this global society by trying to communicate interculturally and establish intercultural interactions that are not exclusively in your native language.
Absolutely. I'm super passionate about that. It's really at the top of my things that make me vibrate on a high frequency, but it's also very practical and it can get you out of sticky or awkward situations, which you've mentioned that it's helped you in a few situations. So can you talk about that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, I lived in Korea, in South Korea in 2008, 2009. And it was actually the first country I lived in on my own as an adult, without my parents attached to me, and really going out there and doing my own thing and I went over there to work, starting a musical theater academy over there. And, when I moved there, I've always been fascinated by language and culture and travel and stuff. And I went full in and I wanted to learn this language. And I started learning the Hangul script. Interesting fact, actually, Korea was one of the first countries in the world with 100% literacy rate because King Sejong, Korean people are very proud of King Sejong because he brought the Korean alphabet to the country. Essentially, he developed this language system because prior to the Hangul alphabet, Korea was using Hancha, which is the Chinese alphabet. And the Chinese alphabet is really not for laymen. It's so complicated. Every word almost has its own character. So your average person couldn't learn how to read. And then King Sejong completely revolutionized the Korean language by developing its own script, which then enabled, honestly, anybody to medium intelligence would be able to learn Hangul in about 2 to 3 hours of concentrated effort sitting down. You could actually start reading words and sentences very, very quickly. And so Korea actually became one of the first countries to have 100% literacy rate as a result of this. So, I mean, these are just things I would never have learned that unless I actually made the effort to learn Korean, And, when I would meet Korean people in any part of the world, when I would talk about these things, they were almost just kind of blown away that I had done this kind of work and that I had made this kind of effort to learn about their culture and their language. And it just gave me such entree into that culture. And particularly living in Korea, the United States was heavily involved in the Korean War. So South Korea is obviously very pro-American. And there is a very big American presence in Korea as well, particularly in Seoul. There was a huge military base for a very long time. I believe since I left, they moved it elsewhere, but there was an area of Seoul called Itaewon, which was kind of the Western ghetto. That's what I'll call it. But it's basically where all of the military people were hanging out when they weren't on duty. And, it was very easy to live in Korea within this bubble where you never actually had to learn any Korean. And I came across so many people who were either there with the military or were English teachers, because that was one of the number one things that people went over to Korea to do. And I met all these English teachers from mostly from the United States and Canada, because those were the number one, that was the number one accent group that Koreans desired. But I also met a lot of people from Ireland, from the UK, Australia, New Zealand, etc. But I found that these people were basically living in these English-speaking bubbles in Korea without ever really learning any Korean. And I had met even people who had been living there for like 7 to 10 years, and they still couldn't read Hangul. Literally, it takes 3 hours to sit down and learn how to read it. And I realized, you've been living here for 7 to 10 years, looking at buses, looking at signs, looking at things, not having a clue what's going on around you. And I just found that so fascinating. But I really made the effort. I jumped in, did full-on Korean classes, achieved probably a low intermediate to mid-intermediate range in Korean in my fluency. And I did a trip once by myself around Korea, just grabbed a little backpack and off I went, taking a bus to the countryside. And, when you look like me, a brown guy, bearded, it can be sometimes a little bit off-putting or worrisome to people who aren't exposed to a lot of different cultures and stuff. And, when you go into the countryside of Korea, I often found that people, when they would immediately see me, they would immediately kind of be taken aback, or they wanted to take retreat and step away. And what I found was, when I would speak Korean, I remember one time I went to a restaurant, and the women running the restaurant, I could totally tell that they were open, but they were basically telling me they weren't open because they didn't want me to sit down. And then I started speaking Korean, and then I started asking them, is there another restaurant in the area that maybe I could go to that is open? I was asking them in Korean in the very polite way to do so. And immediately when they realized that I could actually speak their language and I could read their menus, they immediately said, oh, no, you can come in and sit down. And then they basically started, making all of these very unique dishes that you wouldn't normally find in a restaurant that they would normally do for their families. And I ended up being like spoon-fed essentially by these ajumas. That's what they call them in Korea, like aunties or like, middle-aged women. That's how they refer to them. It's not nice in Western standards, but over in Eastern cultures, they like to be called aunties, and this is the respectful way to do so. And I just felt so welcome immediately, and I could see all of that worry and all of that aloofness and standoffishness just melt away, and I just felt so welcome, and I felt like I really made an amazing cultural connection there. And also, they probably had never met an American person who spoke Korean so well before, and much less an American person who was not Caucasian, who could even speak any Korean. So for them, it must have just been the first time, as for me, the first time to have had such an experience as well. So it was just a beautiful moment that I'm going to cherish for the rest of my life, really.
That's so amazing. That's such a special thing, when especially you got the insider experience. And I feel like that's what language learning gives you, is an insider experience. But as a brown person, I think that's particularly unique, that you went into this situation, recognized they are hesitant towards me at best, afraid of me, or racist towards me at worst, but I'm gonna language ninja them, and then they're gonna love me, and then we're gonna sit down and Auntie's gonna feed me, and it's gonna be so great. And of course you didn't know that was going to be the outcome, but I love how speaking a language can bridge those gaps, and it's the beginning of overcoming, it can be, some of those things. You've had some experiences with colorism kind of inverted in India, where you're living in Western India. Can you share about that too? Because I found that contrast between the kitchen story and the apartment story pretty interesting.
Hey everyone, just a quick interruption to show gratitude to our sponsors and give you some special deals. The UWF Historical Trust. We shoot the show in the Museum of Commerce and the T.T. Wentworth Museum. And not only is this an amazing step back into the 18 and 1900s, but it's an event space too. How cool is that? You can see everything at historicpensacola.org. If you want to tour one of the 12 museums, and yes, Pensacola has 12 museums, and you get your tickets in person, show the ticket agent one of my emails and you'll get $2 off an adult ticket. You can get emails by texting REAL to 66866. So I don't have kids, but I also want to tell you about It's Your Magazine. They're a national family-centered publishing company with free parent magazines. They have parenting advice, events, and inspiration. I'm actually in a networking group with the publisher, and this guy is all about family. You can view a free magazine in cities in Texas, Oregon, Washington, and Florida by checking them out at itsyourmagazine.com. And INSEC. So I've always felt iffy about pesticides. Then the mosquitoes got so bad, I would get covered in them from walking from my house to the car. I called INSEC, and to say I've been impressed is an understatement. When the treatment wasn't quite doing it, the owner actually came to my house. He found the breeding sites, identified the species of mosquito, and adjusted my treatment to that species. That's when I found out he's also a beekeeper, and pollinator issues are always top of mind. So if you're in the Florida Panhandle or Gulf Coast of Alabama, give him a call, ensec.net.
And Dr. Rob Thompson in Pensacola, Florida. There are a million chiropractors in this town, but Dr. Rob is different. He doesn't just give you a crack pop and a slap on the ass. I mean, that would actually be really inappropriate. His pledge is to provide fast, efficient pain relief with no drawn-out treatment plans or surprise bills. Since COVID, we all got 99 problems. Don't let pain be one of them. drrobchiropractic.com.
Now back to the show.
Oh, totally, with pleasure. So colorism is a very intricate, complicated thing. India, of course, is a former colony. So there's a strong colonial history here. It was a former colony of the United Kingdom of Great Britain, much as the United States was as well. And India achieved independence in 1945, but the presence of the colonialism is still very much here. And, you know, one of the ways that the English colonized, particularly over in the East, was to essentially divide and conquer the people and make them not trust each other. So essentially, people of Indian origin would be mistrustful of people of Indian origin within their own country, but then trust their colonizers far more. And what I often find here in India, as a person of Indian origin, I was born in India. I mean, I lived here till I was about 7 years old. And yes, I did spend most of my life abroad, but I am Indian and I can speak 2 Indian languages. And what I find interesting is here in Goa, which is a very beautiful area on the coast. It's been known for decades as kind of a hippie mecca. It was, you know, the classic place on the hippie trail when people would make that venture from London all across Central Asia through Iran, Afghanistan. I'm talking about back in the 70s and 60s when these countries were extremely peaceful, and people would make that trek all through Central Asia, the Middle East, through Nepal, and then to India. And Goa was kind of the end point of all of that. And it naturally became a hippie mecca over many, many decades. And what I find interesting here is when I would go to look at an apartment or something that I would maybe be interested in moving into, that the owners or whatever, when they would immediately see me, they would have negative stereotypes because I'm Indian. They would immediately think, especially as an Indian male, single, maybe he's gonna, I mean, I'll just say literally what is going through their minds. Maybe he's gonna bring hookers over, maybe he's gonna create problems for us, maybe he's a drug dealer, maybe he's gonna be, you know, maybe he's not gonna pay his rent at all, maybe he can't even afford the place, you know? So there's so many stereotypes that immediately come up in their minds. But what I found interesting, because I've navigated these issues myself often enough here that I know what will win them over. And in this case, a Western friend of mine who's been studying Indian classical dance for a very long time. She's from South Africa and Portugal. And the minute that she was with me and the same landlord saw me and her together, I was immediately validated in their eyes because I was then more trustworthy because I had Western acquaintances. Isn't that interesting? And I won't just say Western acquaintances, I'll say white acquaintances. The fact that I had white people who accepted me, or I had, you know, kindred friendships with Caucasian people or whatever, that it made me more trustworthy in my own country. Isn't that interesting?
I don't know if interesting is the word that I would choose, but I love that it is the word that you choose and the perspective that you choose to look on it with. Colorism is just something that I wasn't aware of until later in life. My first experience, I was working at a family-owned Taiwanese restaurant, and I was the only white person to be hired. And I was kind of a controversial hire. And part of that was, you know, the different family members, especially the matriarchal women, choosing whether or not they were going to accept me. As someone who loves culture, I ate it up. Every day I went to work, I was like, this is so fun. They might reject me. They might make me do hard labor. I don't care. This is like so exciting. You know, and they definitely talked about me in Mandarin, like to my face. I'm like, y'all, I can read body language. I can see that this is not positive. But the process of calling them out and being like, just tell me what you're saying. Like, let's just talk. Let's just get through this, whatever your issue is, let's work through it. But later on, one of the older women came to me and she kept talking to me or looking at me and talking, and then looking at her friend or other relative, and the other woman was like, boo, 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 no, 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 no. And then the older woman kept creeping closer and closer to me. And then finally the other woman sighed and said, she wants to touch your face. And I was like, okay, that's cool. And then she touched my face. She got really close to my face. And then she touched her own skin. And she said, ooh, black, ugly. And in her expression when she said it, she was serious. She wasn't joking. You know how sometimes women make self-deprecating jokes? She was so serious that she was like, hated her skin and she wanted white skin. And that was the first time I ever was aware of anything like that. How do you, from traveling, overcome the hatred of both people against themselves and of others, and have that perspective of, oh, this is interesting. Oh, let's work through this. Oh, let's connect. How do you keep that optimism?
Wow. So you are hitting probably something that has been a constant struggle for me in my own life. Actually, that's very prevalent in India as well. Asian societies in general, they have an obsession with fairness, we'll say that. So having very white skin or light skin was historically kind of a sign of wealth, because that meant you didn't have to work outdoors. It meant that you could lead a life of comfort because you weren't out in the sun working and so forth. And India also struggles with this very same issue. India is probably one of the most white obsessed countries in the world, so much so that people actually use bleaching creams to bleach their skin to a lighter shade. And I travel a lot in India, and being of Indian origin, I mean, I tan. Normally, right now I'm darker in skin tone than I would normally be because I'm out in the sun regularly. But when I travel, you know, I'm out in the sun. I love the sun. I don't avoid the sun. And people from India usually will never stand in the sun or lay out on the beach and stuff. That even when I would be out traveling and then I would go home to my family here in India, they would buy me that bleaching cream because they would tell me I was ugly with this skin tone, you know, that I look like a beggar out on the streets is literally what they would tell me in our language. And, you know, I think this is part of this issue of the grass is always greener on the other side, you know, because over in Western cultures, we have people who are very, very fair skinned actually trying to get tans, you know, because they want to be darker and look more bronze and have a quote unquote a healthier Mediterranean looking skin tone. So I think the greatest problem is really that society ingrains in our heads that we aren't good enough as who we are really, and how we were born and the skin that we're given. You know, this is a gift that we live in this body, you know, our body is a temple for the soul that we house. And it's such a shame that we get socialized to believe that we are anything but perfect exactly as we are. And for me, it's been a great internal struggle living in this culture, being Indian and so forth, to kind of break through that and not let that kind of cloud my own judgment or my own self-worth anymore, and just be myself and live authentically and really just be comfortable in my skin, regardless of what skin tone I'm going to be. Of course, it is work though, you know, because sometimes I do feel like I get that negative reaction if I am darker skinned from some people. And it happens in terms of casting. You're an actor as well, you know, here in India. Sometimes when you are darker in skin tone, it makes you less hireable as an actor. So I do try to keep that in mind sometimes, but I'm never going to be somebody who's going to be putting on bleaching cream on my body to change my skin tone. This is just a line I won't cross. I did do it in the past to make other people happy, but I will never do it again in my life to make anyone else happy. And I've gotten to the point where I feel comfortable enough in my skin. And this is something I wish more people would talk about, to actually put the message out there. And it's in the media, you know, if we could have more actors who are actually beautiful and brown in India up on the screen. If you watch Bollywood movies, actually, the actors that you see in the films are so fair-skinned that they almost don't even look Indian anymore. And it basically sets an unreal expectation and desire of beauty, or a beauty standard in the larger community's mind that is unattainable and also only leads to self-shame. And I think, you know, as a film industry, they have the responsibility, the cultural responsibility, to let the people of this country feel good about themselves. Let's have actors up on the screen who look like the majority of this country, and let's empower these people and let them feel good about the skin that they're born into. This is the change I would love to see in India, but I think this is a long ways off. In terms of travel, I mean, honestly, I think I've navigated the issue, not issue, I won't call it an issue, but you know, being Indian and Western, that what kinds of stereotypes somebody might immediately have based on seeing my skin color, or if I tell them, it's funny actually, because in the US I often get asked, what's your nationality? And this is my number one pet peeve, that people say, what is your nationality, when what they mean is, what is your ethnicity?
Yes.
What's your ethnic background?
Right.
Well, my nationality is the same as yours. I'm American. I'm a US passport holder, you know, but my ethnicity is Indian. Yeah. So what I find interesting is that there I get asked that question, but then also here I'll get asked, where are you from, all the time, even though I'm Indian. So I kind of don't really fit in anywhere as being totally local, which I've learned to embrace as well, that I'm just somebody who can fall in and out of cultures. And I look at that as a gift rather than as a curse as maybe I had looked at in the past.
Yeah. And I think you being able to connect with other people in their language, have that relationship, your self-acceptance is contagious, and maybe the culture as a whole won't be making any big shifts anytime soon, but to take care of yourself and love yourself is maybe cliche, but the start of making those changes and having it be contagious by talking with other people. And if that means talking in their language awkwardly, then you just power through it. But to show that different mindset, this has been such a cool conversation. I cannot wait to visit you in person. I could talk to you forever. But before we go, can you please share a short bit about the El Shaddai Charitable Trust? You wanted our listeners and viewers to know about that.
Sure. So the El Shaddai Charitable Trust is an organization here in Goa, which is the state that I'm in right now. And what they do is they basically create homes for children that are orphaned and give them a happy place to live and give them a second chance at life. Many of these children come from very impoverished backgrounds. They have an incredibly transparent, they're very transparent about how they use their money and the money that comes in terms of charitable donations. And you can find them online. I've sent you the link already. And they do a ton of work here in Goa to house children who are either impoverished or are living out on the streets. So they rehabilitate a lot of street children, give them a chance at life, give them an education. And a lot of them go on to succeed and do well living here in Goa. And anything that empowers children and gives, children are the most vulnerable beings in our society. I mean, they cannot control the circumstance that they're born into and often can't even control anything happening around them. And unfortunately, in a country like India, which does suffer from its ample, level of corruption, plus, there's a lot of poverty. And then given the current situation with COVID, it is actually affecting the people from the middle to lower classes the most. And it's actually been a tremendous burden on them. And if people are inspired by this conversation and inspired by maybe helping some people who are less fortunate than they are, especially children, I strongly recommend them to get online, check out that website. You can see all of the work that they do. They're an incredibly good organization. They operate with both religious and non-religious principles, so it speaks to everybody. And I think everyone can relate to their mission. It's really a beautiful cause. And I came across several of the people working with the charity over my time here in Goa, and the work and the passion that they bring to this mission is just incredible. And I want to support them in any way that I can. I don't care to self-publicize or anything like that, but if I can add value to the lives of people here that have given me a home in Goa during this whole COVID slowdown, that's what I'll call it, rather than a lockdown, that's the greatest thing that I can do.
That's awesome. I'll definitely be sharing that so people can check it out. Thank you again. It's always such a pleasure talking with you. That's a wrap, my friend.
Likewise, Meredith. Woo. Thank you, Meredith. It's such a pleasure to talk to you as always.
Are you still listening? Just kidding, of course you are. Since you're here, here's some ways you can support the show. Stalk me on social media, leave a review, share an episode with a friend, or check out my Teespring page for delightfully sarcastic apparel. Links are in the episode description.